For number 5, Populous the Two Tribes. This is a downport of Populous 2 from the computer. So there are some differences, but you'll see in a moment. Populous 2, The Two Tribes, is a downport of Populous 2, Trials of the Olympian Gods, released on many computer-based platforms. It is a god game wherein your goal is to build up the land so that your followers can live and prosper, while also trying to wipe out an enemy god and their followers. To do this, you have the ability to control the elements and do things like cause flaming pillars to burn through the enemy's land, damage the landscape, which then has to be reformed, otherwise the buildings aren't as good as they could be. Place random swamps over the landscape so that the enemy followers fall in and die, and a whole myriad of other things. This game is very complicated and very boring to watch if you're not playing it, but if you are, then you're going to be constantly jumping around trying to keep on top of the enemy and keep your village running smoothly by keeping the land flat. But as I said, it is very dull to look at if you're not the one playing it, so I'll move on from this one pretty quickly. To sum it up, think Age of Empires, but you're a god in control over the landscape and not the people. And you also have magic tricks to throw at the enemies. So that being said, let's get on to number 4. For number 4, I decided to go with Splatterhouse 2. So yeah, got a few things to say about that. So let's get into it. Splatterhouse 2 is the sequel to Splatterhouse, obviously. Splatterhouse was not released on the Megadrive or the Genesis. I don't know why. It is a side-scrolling beat-em-up and has a very arcadey feel to it, and while I'm not usually a fan of these kind of games, it does work very well despite its incredible difficulty. The story starts off where the last game ended. Rick has been away from the West Mansion for the last few months, and he's having nightmares about his girlfriend, whom he believes is dead, still being trapped somewhere. So he goes back to the West Mansion looking for her, but he finds another mansion nearby, and the Terror Mask again, which was supposed to have been destroyed at the end of the last game, that gives him supernatural strength. The cell shading works rather well with the gritty atmosphere of the game, giving it a dark, drab look and feeling, while also making the enemies look slimy, detailed and disgusting. The gameplay is very solid despite some rather pronounced gore and the difficulty. While it may cause some people to rage quit, each time you play you will get a little further than before because all the enemies have pronounced patterns to how they behave. That being said, let's have a look at some more gameplay before we get on to number 3. For number 3, Battletoads. There's a fucking sticker over the back. I didn't notice that before. Anyway, let's get into the game. Battletoads is another beat-em-up game wherein you take on the role of Battletoads, which were created to compete with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You can move in 3 dimensions during most of the beat-em-up parts, which serves to make it even more frantic as you need to try and line yourself with the enemies properly before you can hit them. If you don't, then the enemies tend to get stuck in a bit of a rhythm and you can't hit them back unless you move out of their way. But Battletoads splits itself up into several different genres of gameplay so that it doesn't become too stale and repetitive, but this greatly adds to the difficulty through its chop and change method coupled with its need for quick reflexes, because as soon as you get used to a certain style of gameplay, bang, you're into another one. I can't really think of anything else to say about it at this point, so let's have a look at some gameplay and then get on to number 2. Number 2, I don't have a cover for this one, so bear with me. Wonder Boy in Monster World, Monster World. So let's get into that. Wonder Boy in Monster World takes everything good from Wonder Boy and Monster Land and Wonder Boy 3 The Dragon's Trap and smashes them together in a particle accelerator until they've combined into something new and shiny, then pours liquid gold all over it. Yes, it is that good. The game is very dialogue heavy, but the story is convoluted when you try to take it at face value, but it's not meant to be taken that way. Basically, it's the same as Wonder Boy and Monster Land, and it does explain why there is a mecha dragon in the last two games despite its sword and sorcery world. You will have to talk to everyone you come across, or you're not going to be able to progress very far or at all, because all the door locks and things like that are event based, meaning that unless you set an event into motion, they're not going to unlock or activate or anything like that, which makes some of the problem solving quite difficult if you're not paying attention. Getting down to the gameplay, it has the mechanics from the last two games in it, such as interchangeable equipment and spells. Shoe mechanics from Monster Land make a return in that the worse pair of shoes you have, the slower you'll move and the lower you'll jump, which makes it worth upgrading from them as soon as possible and puts a throttle on the gameplay. This forces you to think ahead and take in the wonderful sights and sounds that adorn this game. Definitely one of the best games of the Wonder Boy franchise, if not the best. It is definitely worth a look despite its slow start. Before we get to number one, here are a few honourable mentions. After a couple of honourable mentions, here is number one. Another World, also called Out of This World, is a fantastic game, but I will get into that in a moment. Another World is a puzzle platformer wherein its beauty lies in its apparent simplicity with much harder and much more complex undersides to it. This game will not hold your hand. If you want to even get anywhere in this game, you'll have to think on your feet because it is very unforgiving, and it will seemingly take great pleasure in putting you back a couple of minutes if you're 1 second too slow. While a couple of minutes may not sound too bad, you'd be wrong, because everything you do in this game requires precision and the checkpoints are very sparse. The game was mostly made by one man named Eric Kahi or Shehi or something, I'm sorry mate, I don't know how to say your name, and he only had a little help with the music and sound effects as far as I'm aware. The presentation is fantastic, the cutscenes were revolutionary, and the gameplay is very solid despite being very punishing, with the difficulty curve so steep it will make your head explode with rage if you play it for too long. A must have for the Megadrive collection, Another World is my number one.